You're at 109 right now.
Alright guys, I want you to watch this whole video and I want to titillate you. So I'm going to try to keep it short. Nipsey and 109, these are, I have many experiences where 109 and Nipsey coincide. And here's the first story. The day that Nipsey was murdered, I was in the country of Oman, and within an hour of learning of Nipsey's murder, I was driving to school where I worked, and I was cut off by a car with the license plate 109. In that moment, I was really, pretty much deflated after receiving the news. I was angry that the guy cut me off. I was saddened by Nipsey's murder. But those numbers spoke to me and told me, rest assured you're where you need to be, and God, you're in God's hands. So there I was in the desert, and that happened to me within an hour of learning of Nipsey's murder. So I have I have a number of encounters with those numbers, 109, that have resonated with me deeply, and that was just another one of those moments. Now, thereafter, so 109 in the desert and Nipsey, I had that moment. Right here in Los Angeles, Nipsey's image is painted on the ground at the Crete Academy, and the Crete Academy is located next door to an apartment building that is numbered 6109. 6109. That's the address for the building. So there it is. 109 is next to Nipsey once again, right here in Los Angeles. So I'm bugging off of that coincidence, that that the unity of 109 and Nipsey right there in Los Angeles. And remember, it was 109 that I saw after I learned of Nipsey's murder, and I was in the desert. And what makes that so significant is there weren't many cars to choose from. It's not like the roads were packed with cars. No, this was just one car. There were only two cars on the road, my car and this other car, and the other car's license plate was 109, and it was after Nipsey's murder. Finally, I was watching the Crenshaw, Crenshaw and Slauson True Story music video, and I saw this image pop up on the screen. Now, I had been telling these stories about 109 for a long, or at least, excuse me, I was documenting these stories, with regard to 109 for a long time, since 2007, 15 years. And it was in 2019 that Nipsey, gave this story of 109 a different color and informed me of something very different than what I thought 109 meant before his passing. I thought 109 was just my birthday, and it was just cool that I would see 109 in different places. But when Nipsey passed, 109 has taken on a completely different meaning. And I think it was 2020 when I was watching. It might have been 2019, but anyhow, I was watching that video, Crenshaw Slauson True Story, and I think they have two versions on YouTube. Well, there's one version where they show this image, this picture right here with Nipsey, and when I saw this picture, I thought, boom, there it is again. There it is again. Here you have a picture of Nipsey and 109. You have Nipsey and 109 right here. This picture was taken when Nipsey was in Japan, and he was standing before Shibuya 109. So, I mean, it might be a coincidence, but hey, if you're like me, you believe there are no coincidences. So these are signs. These are messages. This is information that is necessary you gotta tap in and hear this story. So continue to watch and listen, because there's more to come. It's all iSee109, baby. iSee109. Kobe, legends never die. Let them know where they are.
You're at 109 right now. You're at 109 right now. You're at 109 right now. You're at 109 right now.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the iSee109 website, YouTube channel. I'm your host, Larry Wiggs. I have some photos I want to share with you. This photo here was taken in the country of Oman, or rather the next seven photos. The next 7 photos were taken in the country of Oman, also known as the Sultanate of Oman. The 2 women that you see in the photo are holding my book. I asked them to hold my book. I met them in Oman, or rather I saw them and I accosted them. I asked them to take a photo with my book. And they were on a vacation and they didn't want their identities revealed. So they held the book so as to conceal their identities. I told them that was fine. I just needed them to, hold the book and take some photos of some different people. So I have a collection of different people now, and they include those 2 young women. Here's a photo of the radio station, the radio dial as it was set when I jumped into a cab, a random cab, and I noticed that this radio station was the setting 100.9. And when I saw that, the year this photo was taken was probably 2009. No, it definitely was 2019, because this is in Oman. And I had seen those numbers in 2017 in Mexico for the first time. So that was in Mexico for the first time I saw 100.9 on the radio dial. And I thought of my birthday, because 1009 says to me, or just screams to me, that's your birthday. And you can play with those numbers. The second 0 is only a placeholder, but 10 and 9, that's October 9th to me. So I saw that in a random taxi that I happened to hail. Story goes, 100.9 is a very popular, very familiar dial on the radio. It's a strong radio frequency, I guess, and so that's why I saw it in Mexico as well as in Oman. So there you have it. And in Mexico it's a popular radio station. I guess in Oman it is as well. So has nothing to do with me. It's just that is truly a coincidence. It's just those numbers happen to be important. But that's the thing about these numbers. I'm trying to understand, what is their importance? How do they resonate? Like, is it, really 10 and 9? What's up with these numbers? Because they seem to be pretty interesting and funky. This photo here of this taxi that I took in Oman. Well, the story goes, I was leaving Oman, and it was the end of my job, end of my time in Oman. I had lived there for about 7 months. They fired me. They let me go. And I told them, before I leave, I need to have all my money, all my checks, all my money deposited into my account, because they had already issued a plane ticket for me. And I was like, I'm not getting on the plane without my money in hand or in my account. So they said, yeah, we understand. So once your money is deposited into your account, then, we'll issue you another plane ticket. I said, great. So I had to wait for that money. I went to the ATM on the first day to get the money. I'm shortening this story, there are some other details. But anyway, the first day I went to the ATM to check on my balance. There was no money there. The second day I went to the ATM to check on my balance, and there was no money there. On the third day, I was walking down this street in this picture, and I crossed this taxi, and I saw the numbers 1090 on the license plate, and I said to myself, my money is there today. And sure enough, my money was there. Now, you can argue that after 3 days, your money had to have been there, and it was just another coincidence that, yes, there your money was. But that was a cool coincidence, enough for me to, accept this. But anyway, or me to, retell that story, because that's exactly how it happened. I saw that license plate and I knew my money was there. This is a gentleman I came across in Oman. I just asked him to put my book in his hand so I could photograph him, and he was cool with it. He said, hey, they had no idea what the heck they were reading about or whatever. They were just like, okay, take my picture, great. Now the next photo, here it is. All right, this one is also in Oman. We're still in Oman, but this one has a very peculiar story. And talk about, those other two stories, you want to dismiss them as coincidences? Fine. All right, but check this out. So when I began working in Oman, as I mentioned, I was there for about 7 months. This car was parked outside of the office, the headquarters, where I signed my work agreement, work contract, or what have you. When I arrived in Oman, I felt like I was displaced, because I was like, man, I'm an American. Why am I in the Middle East? And what am I doing? Just chasing money, trying to find work and all this. I'm like, what the heck is going on in the world? So I felt displaced, right? And when I was there, when I walked into the office, I noticed this license plate on this car, and I thought to myself, hey, those are your numbers. So relax. Maybe you're exactly where God has placed you. You are exactly where you need to be. So I said, all right, cool. Those are my numbers. So I went in, signed my work contract, whatever. 6 months later, I get back. I've been fired and I'm leaving the country. And I go back to the office to sign documents to leave the country, as I mentioned, to get my final checks and sign off on everything. And I see this car again. And I'm like, dude, I'm taking a photo of that car, because I need to document all of these moments when I see these numbers. And so here's one of the things where it's like, when I looked at this, okay, I assumed that this car belonged to someone in the office, and it was there, or it was company owned, because it had been there all of that time. Or perhaps someone who lived in the area very near to the headquarters, just parked outside. Okay, I don't know whose car that is, what have you, but I certainly noticed those numbers, 10 and 9. Okay, now here's where it gets peculiar, right? Great, I see those familiar numbers, the car's parked outside, whatever. Okay, look at the last 3 digits, 914. All right. So just as I play with these numbers 1009 and I say, hey, that's my birthday, number 914 is my wedding date. All right. Now, let me tell you, when I took this photo, I did not know my wedding date would be September 14th. I had not planned it to be September 14th. I had no knowledge that I would get married on that day. There's no way, no how I could have known, because the way things had played out in my life, I guess, pretty spontaneous, right? I didn't have a particular plan. However, I got married. My wife and I got married. on September 14th, 2019. Now, how did I find this photo? Like, here's what happened. After we got married, my wife and I was telling my stories as I do to my wife, and I was showing her pictures from my travels, and I was explaining to her, the significance of 109 and etc. And then she also looked at this picture as I was showing these pictures to her, and she said, "Hey, do you see the license plate there? Do you see what other numbers are there?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" She's like, "Look closely." She's like, "On what day did we get married?" I was like, September 14th. She was like, "Look at that license plate." And I was like, whoa. So, is that just a coincidence? Or what? Because that pretty much seems like that license plate there foretold what would happen in my future. And that car had been sitting there all of that time. All of that time for several months. I mean, the car actually had moved. So someone was driving the car. But on those particular days when I arrived and when I was leaving, I noticed that car. So think about that. I just told you the story about going to the bank, seeing those numbers and saying, my money's here. It's a sign. And then I see this car outside and I'm thinking, hey, that's a sign. Especially it's a sign for me to relax. God is in control. You're where you need to be. Not only that, but that's my wedding date. That's crazy bizarre right there. That's one for the record books right there, that story. In this photo, this is another gentleman in Oman. He had a boat business where he would take people out on boats so you can go. I went snorkeling out there and they took me around and stuff. And then afterwards, I asked him to take a photo of my book. So there he is taking a photo, So that was cool. Alrighty. This next photo was taken in Spain. Madrid, Spain. Alright. And I snapped this photo and then I posted the photo to Instagram in that order. However, I had... How did this play out? Because if you look at the license plate, you see 1090, right? And according to Instagram, you have a certain number of, Instagram will track the number of posts, the number of photographs you post. So here's what happened. I think this became my 1091st photo. I think that's what it is, because here, my caption reads, I posted my 1090th photo to IG today, and after turning the corner, I saw this license plate. All right. So, I'm in Madrid. I'm at the hotel, and I took a little photo for Instagram, and then I leave the hotel, walk down the block, turn the corner. I see this car parked there. Now I'm already vibing on 109 because I just took my 1090th photo. And so as soon as I turn that corner and I see 1090, I'm like, yo, that's the number. I just posted my 1090th photo. And here is a license plate, 1090. So it was a very synchronous moment where I had just posted my 1090th photo and the license plate was 1090. And I'm just like bugging. I was feeling good though, because I'm like, yo, the universe is with me. I'm right where I need to be, right in pocket. So I was cool with it. I snapped the photo, posted this to Instagram, and it became my 1091st photo in reference to my 1090th photo, which matched and linked with the license plate. That's what happened in Madrid, Spain. That was in 2018, to be sure. This next photo was taken in Bahrain, in Manama, the capital city, Manama in Bahrain. And I have the words Bahrain right now on the screen, but once those are removed, you'll see the numbers 1, 0, and 9 clearly, okay? This story goes, I'm in Bahrain. Bahrain is in the Middle East, for those of you who don't know. I'm in the Middle East, and I was living in Saudi Arabia at the time. I lived in Saudi Arabia between 2016 and 2018. Well, on weekends, I would leave Saudi Arabia and go to Bahrain. It's a common thing for Americans, Brits, whomever works in Saudi Arabia. It's common for us to leave Saudi Arabia and go to Bahrain. Bahrain is kind of like the Las Vegas of the Middle East. It's a wild place. You can get away with a lot of stuff there. And I mean, by get away, I mean, I'm saying you can, in Saudi Arabia, you can't imbibe alcohol, but you can legally in Bahrain. So that's what I'm, in that sense, you can get away with that. Prostitution is rampant in Bahrain. And so you can get away with that. You can meet a young woman and you can have a nice time with her in Bahrain. And so these are the kinds of things that I'm aware of. I didn't dabble or, in drugs and all of that. And I don't know if that's available. That's not true. I do know. I do know that weed was available. So I don't know where it comes from, how it gets there, what have you. Because Saudi Arabia is strict. Saudi Arabia is all about chopping off heads and killing people if they disobey. Excuse me, I made a mistake there. I've got to, okay. That was a little mistake. I'm editing as I am recording this audio. Okay, so the story goes with this photo. I'm in Bahrain, Manama, and oh, you know what? I'll have to edit that part out where because you're not even going to know that I had that error, because that error is not even going to be in there. Anyhow, so the story goes, I'm in Bahrain in Manama, and I go into a motel. I asked to get a room. They assign me a room. They're like, here, take this room. I'm like, fine, whatever. I just need a room. And I go into the room, and this is what I see. The television was not on, and those numbers were prominently displayed on the screen. And I was like, what is that? How did that happen? What do those numbers mean? What is this, another one of those frequencies that are very popular, like the radio station 100.9? Like what? What is it? There it was. So, is it a coincidence? Perhaps. Now, when I saw those numbers, I thought to myself, those numbers are so familiar to me, because up until that point, I had seen these numbers every which way, and I couldn't explain it. And I thought, man, maybe the CIA knows exactly where I am in the world, and on the planet, and wherever I go, they just put these numbers just for me to find them, and as little signals, like, hey, if you pay attention to these numbers, then that's a sign that you are aware, that we are aware of where you are. And I was bugging, paranoid as all heck when I saw those numbers, because it was like, those numbers are so peculiar. Like, why? So, and they're so specific, to me. That's my birthday. That's what I see. This is a photo taken in Cambodia. And again, while I was in Cambodia, I asked people to hold my book so I could get photos and have a record of my travels. And this young woman was gracious enough to hold my book and allow me to take a photograph of her in a local park. So there you have it. And moving on, this photo was taken in Ethiopia at Addis Ababa University. I'll try to keep this story short. I was at Addis Ababa University. I was at the museum. The museum is located on the 2nd floor, and I needed to go to the restroom. I walked to the restroom, again on the 2nd floor, and on my way to the restroom, en route to the restroom, I passed this door. This door was to the left. All right, down the hall, this door was to the left. This door does not lead to the restroom, but it was adjacent to the bathroom door. And as I was walking, I'm looking from side to side, trying to figure out, trying to get my bearings, trying to get an idea what, which way is the restroom. And as I'm walking down the hall, and that's the prayer call. Ooh. All right. So I'm walking down the hall, trying to figure out, this maze. I mean, it's a new building for me, So I'm like, all right, where am I going? Where am I going? So I'm walking down the hall, headed to the restroom, looking at the doors that I pass, and this is one of the doors I pass, and I see the numbers 10 and 9 written on the door, and I'm bugging like, yo, how the heck does this happen? I'm in Ethiopia now, and yet I still see these numbers. And then I'm like, well, 109, like it doesn't correspond with the floor that I'm on. I would expect to see those numbers on the first floor. First floor, rooms 101, 102, 103, 104, etc. But we're on the 2nd floor, and in fact, the door is labeled room 202-203. So behind that door, there are a couple of offices, room 202 and 203. But someone wrote 109 on that door. So I'm bugging, like, why? Why are those numbers there? What do those numbers mean? Like, in Ethiopia, like, for what reason were they written on that door? So I was just bugging. So I took the photo and I was like, man, I keep seeing these numbers. I showed you. I was in Manama. I was in Spain. I was in Oman. Just keep seeing them. This photo was taken in 2018 on my last trip to Ethiopia. I've been to Ethiopia about 4 or 5 times. And on my last trip, this photo, I snapped this one. So that's the story. And today it's 2022. And I don't know. I still don't know the significance of those numbers in Ethiopia. And it's curious to me because those numbers do have significance in other countries, specifically Japan, which I'll get to, in a moment or so. But yeah. All right, so this is my buddy from Taekwondo. We studied Taekwondo together when we were kids. This is Sam, and Sam is actually from Yemen. And I shared my story with him via smartphone. So he got a copy, and I asked him to snap a photo of himself with it, and he did. He followed up with me, which is something that I appreciate, man. Thanks, Sam. So it's part of marketing, telling my story. I've got to market. I've got to document these things and get support and what have you. And that was one example right there from Sam. The next photo here, I was in Thailand, and this gentleman is a tailor. I popped into his shop one day, looked around, and decided that I would buy some suits. This gentleman made 2 suits for me, and 2 shirts. So I was able to get 2 suits and 2 shirts for about $600, custom fitted, custom made. And I thought that was a steal. So I made the purchase. He measured me, and then he began making my garment. I left Thailand, gave him my address, and he shipped them to me. So that was pretty dope. Pretty dope indeed. So, yep, that's possible. This is a brother from the States whom I encountered while I was there in Thailand. And I don't know if we met at the Ethiopian restaurant, but I was like, hey man, if you're a brother and you're near this Ethiopian restaurant, then come hang out. So he sat down with us and we talked a little bit about our experiences in Thailand and other countries, and basically what brought us together. And I think it was work, and so we just shared our little stories. Cool brother. I asked him to hold my book, check it out. I was telling him my story, and he agreed for me to photograph him. So I got this photograph here. That's what's up. And the next day or so, I went on a tour in Thailand, and they have this this market that is extremely close to the train tracks. And so there I was sitting on the train tracks, and I decided to have my photo taken and whatnot. Now, once the train passes, or before the train passes, those train tracks are just covered by merchants. People are just using the train tracks and just setting up their shops right there on the tracks. And then as the train is approaching, the train moves very slowly as it approaches. But as the train is approaching, the people gather their belongings, and then they sort of recede, they pull back and let the train pass. It's an interesting experience. And then once the train passes, they go right back to work, laying out all of their wares out and doing their thing. I believe it was 2020. This is my wife here. And we traveled to Tulum, Mexico. And I chose Tulum because Nipsey had been to Tulum, and Nipsey filmed his video there, Victory Lap. And they have the Mayan ruins, and it's just a beautiful place. And so I thought, like, gotta follow in Nipsey's example. Gotta follow. Where did Nipsey go? Gotta touch the places that Nipsey touched. I was able to go to Tulum, but I wasn't able to go to the Mayan ruins as Nipsey described them, because or mentions in his record, because that was during the height of COVID, and all of those locations were shut down. So that was pretty much a bummer. This photo here, just as I mentioned many minutes ago now, with Oman, when I jumped into a taxi and their radio station was set to 100.9 on, I guess, the FM dial. Same thing here. I was in Mexico. I jumped into my Uber, and my Uber driver had the radio station, or the dial set on 100.9 on the radio station. So you can see my name at the top there, because that's the Uber app, saying, all right, he's picking up Larry and taking him. I was en route to the Frida Kahlo Museum. All right, that's where I was headed. And for me, this was about, there it is, 9:05 in the morning. And being dropped off at the Frida Kahlo Museum was pretty cool because seeing those numbers, that was one moment of synchronicity, of a coincidence, of a mysterious sort of thing. Like randomly, I get this driver, and he's got 100.9 on the radio. I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool. It was cool to me at the time. That this was 2017, because this was before Oman, where I jumped into the taxi. It was 2 years later in Oman. All right. This photo was 2017. In Oman, it was 2019. And so I guess like for 2 years I was bugging, like, wow, man, I saw those numbers when I jumped into a taxi, a random Uber in Mexico. Wow, wow, wow. Okay. So there was that. Until 2019, when it happened again in Oman. But then it wasn't until my wife and I were in Tulum that I was back in Mexico. I was talking about my book, and I shared my book, and I asked the guy, I said, what's up with these numbers? And he looked at them, and he's like, oh, yeah. That's a really popular radio station in Mexico. And so that's when it was like, oh, okay. No big deal. It's just a popular radio station. And it must have been. That's why I arrived at the conclusion. It must just be a popular radio station in Oman as well. So, and just a very good frequency, a popular, I don't know, call numbers or something on the radio dial. But anyway, I thought it was a neat coincidence seeing those numbers when I got into this random taxi in Mexico. But here, it doesn't stop there, because something else happened. Something else happened that isn't related to these numbers, but it happened on this day, right? Okay. So on the day, I see these numbers. I get out the taxi. I go in, enjoy myself. I'm at the Frida Kahlo Museum. I'm like, cool. The Frida Kahlo Museum is called the Blue House. Okay. I enjoy my trip in Mexico. I get back to LA. And my sister calls my mom and dad's home, where I am at the time. I pick up the phone, and my sister is surprised that I am at home, that I'm in Los Angeles, because she thought I was still in Mexico. And so we have a short conversation. She's like, so did you enjoy your trip, and where did you go? And then she asked me, out of the blue, did you go to Frida Kahlo's house? Now, my sister is fluent in Spanish. She knows about Frida Kahlo. She loves Frida Kahlo. So it really wasn't a big deal for her to ask me about Frida Kahlo. I mean, Frida Kahlo is famous the world over, so it was just natural, if we're talking about Mexico, to include Frida Kahlo. But here's the thing about that conversation. When my sister asked me about Frida Kahlo, it was simply based upon the fact that I had been to Mexico. That's it. There was nothing else to it. She was just like, oh, I know you've been to Mexico. What about Frida Kahlo? Did you go to the house? I'm like, yeah. My sister did not know that when she asked me that question, where I was standing in the house, I was standing next to a table with like memorabilia from my trip on that table. I was standing just in front of that table. And so as my sister and I are talking, I'm looking down at the table, and the table is littered with memorabilia. That includes 4 postcards I purchased at the Blue House at Frida Kahlo's home. There were 4 postcards, all of which had Frida Kahlo's image on it. So literally, as my sister was asking me about Frida Kahlo, I was looking at the table, and I was staring at Frida Kahlo, at her image on these postcards. And I was like, wow, that's such a neat coincidence that you would ask me about Frida Kahlo while I'm basically looking at Frida Kahlo. And then I mean, the conversation was pretty short, and she just asked me about Frida Kahlo, asked me about my trip to Mexico, and then she was like, okay, cool, all right, talk to you later, and that was it. Boom. And I didn't think anything of it. Later that same day, you see, after that conversation, I went into my room, I went to sleep. I was tired. I awoke and I started searching through Instagram. And I'm just scrolling through Instagram, like, hey, what's going on in the world? And I come across a photo of Frida Kahlo. And I'm like, wait a minute. I was just looking at Frida Kahlo's images when my sister asked me about Frida Kahlo. And I thought that was a neat coincidence. And now I'm looking through Instagram and I come across a photo of Frida Kahlo. And I'm like, that's interesting and coincidental as well. And then I read the caption. And the caption says, "Happy birthday, Frida." Now my mind is blown. I'm like, yo, I was standing in front of photos with Frida Kahlo. My sister asked me about Frida Kahlo out of the blue. That was a big coincidence. But now I'm learning that all of this transpired on Frida Kahlo's birthday? I'm really bugging at this point. So what I do is I contact my sister. And I say, hey, during our conversation a few hours ago, did you know, or rather, heck, forget, 3 hours ago or what have you, just did you know that today was Frida Kahlo's birthday? And my sister was like, no, I had no idea. I was just asking you about the Blue House because you went to Mexico. And I'm like, get out of here. So that's what happened. In addition to seeing 100.9 on the radio, Frida Kahlo's spirit somehow created this weird moment, or rather moments, Now, this photo was taken probably, several days or so before that conversation with my sister. But so it was kind of like whatever energy was, it carried over past my trip to Mexico. So that's my story, y'all. This image here is this is an image of a friend, a colleague of mine in Oman. And just as, I've asked other people to, snap photos and whatnot, I asked my colleague to snap photos and to, let me, use that image, for marketing purposes for my book and whatnot. And this is Nicole Brewer, and she allowed me to take her photo, which was really cool, really dope. The next image here is one taken in Vietnam. Same situation, same scenario. I asked random people to take a picture with my book in hand. This woman knew the assignment. She understood the assignment very well. I approached her. I said, put my book in your hands. I'll give you some money. I'll snap your photo. And she grabbed the book, looked through it, and then she started making faces like, ooh, the book is interesting. Ooh, the book is exciting. Wow, look at that. Oh, she was a natural born actress. Like, oh man, I love this lady. She's cool. She knows what's up. So she was just acting for me. I gave her a few bucks for her time, and then I peaced out. So that was a very special, very cool thing. The next image is of my ferry ticket, one that I realized, or I found a couple of days ago. I was looking through my things and I came across this ticket, and I'm so happy I have it. I still have it. So I took a photo of this ticket here because it's a ferry ticket, a ticket from a ferry between Korea and Japan, and the ferry from Japan back to Korea. You probably cannot see it right now with the title over the numbers, the call letters and the call number. So just in a second, when the name Japan disappears, it's gone. Okay. If you look closely at the ticket, it says there under the date, this was 2015. This was October 6th, 3 days before my birthday. And the call letters are JF109. You see that? JF109. So I had no idea. This was just a very cool coincidence. Anytime I see those numbers, I'm like, wow, there they are. And I rode that ferry from Japan back to Korea. Alrighty. I do not know how to pronounce her name correctly. Hina Hasunuma? Or is it Haina? Haina Hasunuma. I think it's Hina. But I could be wrong. I don't know. Anyhow, this young woman here works, or rather, she was the manager. She worked at Shibuya 109. She retired from her job. Young woman. The name of her shop is Baby Shoop. She has the bag in her hand. It says Black for Life. Interesting story. At this shop, they sell like black lifestyle inspired fashion items. So if you like the black lifestyle, whatever that is, you know, hip hop, reggae, R&B, these types of music genres inspired the styles that are sold in this shop and that the Japanese pick up on and appreciate. In addition to it, they also tan their skin to be darker, to be closer to black people. So Black for Life is the motto for the Baby Shoop brand. I learned about them on YouTube because this young woman was heavy into that culture, heavy into that style of tanning her skin, to look darker. And she was the manager of this Black for Life store at Shibuya 109. And those are those numbers, 109. So I was intrigued with her story first. And then later when I went to Japan, I started to see the numbers, 109. That's when it really resonated with me. Before, I was just like, hey, she's cool. And I want to meet her, and I want to learn more, because it was like blackness, this affinity for blackness is really something that, it's really interesting, and I want to know more about that. And so that's what initially attracted me to this Shibuya 109 place. But then it dawns on me, it's like, man, but 109, those are your numbers. Like, wow. Now, what I did not know, and what I later learned, is like why 109 is so prevalent throughout Tokyo. And this is interesting because 109, like the Japanese engage in wordplay, goro awase wordplay, where they, instead of saying a name, they will read a number that sounds like the name. So in the case of the name Tokyo, they will say the numbers 109 or the number 109, which sounds like Tokyo because you have the to, which means 10, and gyu, which means 9. So Tokyo, Tokyo sounds like Tokyo. It's not an exact, they're not exact, but it's an equivalent, and it's so close that they just play with these words, and it's a cool thing. So what I noticed is, like, throughout Tokyo, 109 is a very prevalent number because it's so similar to the name of the city. So throughout the city of Tokyo, you will find 109 or Tokyo, Tokyo, Tokyo. Now, to underscore this idea, Japan has a company called Tokyo Hands. And the Tokyo Hands company is so fascinating because, like, when I was in Japan, I would see Tokyo Hands and I'd say to myself, what the heck is this Tokyo Hands? Like, it's supposed to be Tokyo. Like, is this a misspelling of Tokyo? To spell it with the U? Like, why do they say Tokyo? What is this Tokyo? So literally, I was frustrated not knowing what Tokyo meant. And yet, I was literally staring at myself, right? Because 10-9 is my birthday, and Tokyo means 10-9. And I'm like, what is this? What is this? What is this? And then when I really understood it and learned it, I said, oh, man, I was looking at myself. I'm like, man, I love Japan. Everywhere you go in Japan, Tokyo, that's 10-9. So that's what's up with Japan. So there, I understand the significance of 10-9 in Japan, given that they engage in Goro Awase. But I still don't know about Ethiopia and why I saw 109 on that door, written on that door. But there is a Japanese connection to 109 being written on a door, or a door with a door 109. And I'll explain it in a second. But the thing about it is, like, I saw 109 written on a door in Ethiopia. So, like, how does that connect? All right, so let me explain. First off, I've been to Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Those are the two cities where the atomic bombs were detonated. I've been to both, okay? Next, the atomic bomb was created, or it was the product of the Manhattan Project that was Oppenheimer's baby. I think those are accurate statements, all right? They're not precise. Was it John Oppenheimer? No, it was John D. Rockefeller, not whatever. So Oppenheimer was this dude who, spearheaded the Manhattan Project and the development of the atomic bomb. Then you got, the Manhattan Project. Okay. The Manhattan Project was the scientists who worked on the Manhattan Project met in New Mexico. Probably they met in many places, but New Mexico was one of the primary locations for their meetings. And the address where they would meet is basically 109 East Palace Road, Avenue, Boulevard, whatever. But 109 East Palace. You got me? You with me? So Japan and 109, there's not only the Tokyo connection, the Goro Awase connection, but it's also this connection with the atomic bomb. And so the door behind which the atomic bomb was developed, essentially, was door 109. There's a book. It's called 109 East Palace. It details the importance of that location and what went on behind that particular door. So, why was the door in Ethiopia numbered 109? Someone had written 109. I don't know. Was it a joke? Were they saying, hey, I know what happened at behind door 109. I'm going to write those numbers on this door and pretend as if whatever. That's a lot into it. But there they were. Those numbers. Those 3 digits were written on the door in Ethiopia. And then Japan, there you have it. Japan's 109, Shibuya 109, Tokyo, Hiroshima, Nagasaki. So, yeah. So 109 has great significance with regard to Japan and Tokyo. You know what? I'm realizing as I'm talking about this that there are probably many more connections or interpretations of 109 or just, significance. Because if you look at 109 or 109 as a date, there are probably some very, prominent people who were born on that day that I don't even know of, So I'm putting this story together, but it's probably a lot that I'm missing. Probably a lot. Speaking of people being born on, 10/9, here's a story about someone who died on 10/9, but nevertheless, the date is significant anyhow. This is the story of Cuban revolutionary leader Ernesto Che Guevara de la Serna. Story goes, I was in Cuba when I was reading this book. This is the Motorcycle Diaries by Che. And in the first few pages, they're detailing his biography, in which at one point the line reads, Insurgency troops on October 8th of 1967. Let me go back. He was wounded and captured by U.S. trained and run Bolivian counterinsurgency troops on October 8th, 1967. All right. And the following day, he was murdered and his body hidden. If I'm not mistaken, the following day after October 8th is October 9th. So that's 10/9. So Che was murdered on 10/9. And I was reading this book when I learned that fact. But I wasn't reading this book in Los Angeles. I wasn't reading it in China, Korea, Japan, Australia. I was reading it in the country where his body had been buried. I was reading it in Cuba. Now, in 1997, when I graduated from high school, I wasn't paying attention really to the news, but in that year, his body was still in Bolivia. And so 97, that was 30 years after he had been killed. He was killed in 67, and his body was still buried in Bolivia in 1997, right? I was reading this book in 2017. Let's see, which is 20 years? Which is 20 years later. And from in 1997, his body was exhumed. His skeletal remains were exhumed and then identified. And then they were repatriated to Cuba, where they lie today. And so by the time I made it to Cuba, I was there when basically Che Guevara was there. Because had I been to Cuba before then, his body Well, I mean, that's a considerable amount of time. But if I had been there, if I had gone to Cuba, if I had been to Cuba, before 1997, his body would not have been there, or his remains. But there I was, in the country where his remains were, learning that he died on October 9th. That's my birthday. And I was learning it, and it was my first time in Cuba, and I just thought, man, my travels to Cuba have a considerable level of significance, greater significance, now that I know, now that I'm aware of this fact. But I'm also more aware of this fact. Like, I became aware of this fact while in the country. So I thought that was doubly important and significant. And then it was after I left that I realized, whoa, his body is in Cuba, but it hasn't always been. It wasn't always in Cuba. And then I guess that was a third level of significance. Like, his spirit, his bones are in Cuba. I learned that he was killed on my birthday when I was in Cuba. So all of that playing together made for a very much more significant travel. So I thought that was pretty cool, because anytime these numbers stick out during my travels, then they paint my travels in a different light. It's not so much that I'm traveling for vanity and just for a vacation. Nah, my travels take on a new light, a new life of their own. It's like you were supposed to be here. Just as when I was in Oman, and those numbers on the license plate told me that my money was in the account, or that I would get married on that day. These things really were significant to me, and they made my trip so much more meaningful. The last story that I will tell, I have 4 more stories to tell, and the last story is pretty much about how these 109 encounters, color my experience, my travels. This photo here was taken in South Korea. It's a name tag or a name label on a seat, on the back of a seat in an auditorium. It has my name, and it has my group number, AR1009. I could have had any other group number, but that's the group number that I had, 1009. Again, I was like, how are they deciding on these things? How did they put me in this group? Because those are my numbers. And there I am in Korea, with those numbers. So I'm just like, wow, okay. But I'll take it. I'll take it. It's cool. It's cool with me. And so that's pretty much it. I was studying Korean. I was studying the Korean language. I was just about to skip away from South Korea. I was thinking to myself, that's the end of the story right there. I was just assigned that group number, and then I realized, wait a minute. There's a greater level of significance. So there I am in Korea studying the Korean language. I'm assigned to group 1009, and that's my birthday, 1009 or 109. But guess what? It's also the day on which Koreans celebrate the Korean language. How could I have forgotten to mention that? I'm like, yo, this is wildly significant. When I went to Korea with the intent of learning, Taekwondo, the Korean language, and working, of course. And when I discovered that the Korean language has a national holiday and it falls on my birthday, I mean, that was a pretty cool coincidence in and of itself. And I mean, when you have a national holiday fall on your birthday, that's beautiful because you always have that day off. You know? You don't have to work on your birthday. It's a national holiday. That's pretty doggone cool. So I appreciated living in South Korea for, if nothing else, for that reason. Because my birthday fell on a national holiday. That was pretty doggone cool. Alright. So I said 4 stories. I have 3 more stories to go. This is a store in Singapore. Soap stories. You know, they have products, to wash your body, wash your face and all. And I was walking throughout the mall there in Singapore, minding my own business. The mall wasn't very crowded. I noticed that. This was in 2019, before COVID. The mall just wasn't very crowded. As I'm walking through the mall, I passed this particular shop. Now, I'm going to point it out to you before I get into the rest of the story. If you look in the top right corner, you'll see that this store is numbered 01-09. There you have it. Those are the numbers. Those are my numbers. 109. Boom. For real. Right there. I didn't notice those numbers until something happened to me. As I'm walking through this mall, as I'm beginning to pass this store, the salesperson, the sales clerk, the salesman sees me and he starts marketing towards me. Hey, beckoning me. Come on into the shop. I've got a great deal for you. Come on in. And he's just going hard on this sale. He's like very persistent. And I tell him, no, I'm not interested. No, I'm good, whatever. Now, at that point, when he beckoned me, two things I want to mention. Number one, because the mall was empty, pretty empty, okay, the salespeople were not, what do I want to say? There wasn't a lot of activity in the mall. That's what I want to say. So there really was no reason for the salesperson to be so aggressive, right? I had passed a number of other stores, and their salespeople were not interested in calling me over to enter their store, even though I was the only person walking by the stores at that time. They weren't really concerned with me. They were folding merchandise and what have you, and doing whatever they're doing. But this guy was like, "Hey, you, come here, man. I've got a deal for you. Come on in here." And I'm like, "Nah, man, I'm good. I'm just walking. I'm just minding my own business." He's like, "No, come on in here. Come on into the shop. I've got a great deal." And I'm just like, I caved in. Fine, man, whatever. I'll listen to you. But I was in the back of my mind, I'm like, nah, I'm not buying anything. So the guy keeps he's persistent, and he's giving me a great deal. He's telling me that I could buy $300 worth of goods for $100. He was gonna mark everything down and give me an excellent price. And he was like, "Just tell people about the business. That's all I ask in return, and that's it." So I'm like, "Really, dude? That's it? $300, but you want me to pay only $100? I'm like, "Man, this is an amazing deal." And the guy is persistent. I can't really turn this deal down. I'm gonna get some good products from Amsterdam. So I'm like, I tell the guy, "Man, let me think about this." He's like, "Okay." So I walk outside the store, and I'm thinking about it. I'm like, how come this guy is selling to me so hard, so aggressively, man? How come he's got such a great deal on the table for me? And I looked around. I'm like, this is kind of difficult. He's made it very difficult for me to pass up. So then I look around, and I look back at the store. That's when I take this picture, And I mean, I took the picture just right after I noticed those numbers in the corner, and I said, now I understand why this guy is marketing to me. Now I know why he's so persistent. Now I know it makes sense. Those numbers were right there all this time. And I just happened to come into alignment with it, with those numbers. And boom, for real, there it was. So when I saw those numbers, I said, it's a sign. I'm done. You sold me on it. I'm going back in. So I walked back into the store and I'm like, come on, let's finish this this transaction. I'm buying this stuff. And that was it. That's what happened in Singapore. What you're looking at now is the photo I took in Dublin, Ireland. In Dublin, Ireland. And so I had entered this restaurant, and I had a delicious burger and fries and the very first Guinness. My very first Guinness in Ireland. And the total of my bill came to $21.10. Fine, no big deal. But the tab number, that's what I want you to look at. The number of the tab, the receipt number basically was 109. And I was like, how did that happen? I just randomly walked in here. I was just another customer, and I just asked, I ate my meal, drank my drink, I smoked a cigar, and I was like, okay, I'm done. And they bring me this tab number 109. And I'm like, wow. Because that was completely random to me. Completely random. So those were my numbers. I knew I was going to have a good time in Ireland. And I certainly did. Thanks to those numbers. Alright, this is the last one. The last one. This is a photo taken in Sweden, in Stockholm, Sweden, at the Nobel Peace Prize Museum. This is a telegraph written, I guess it was sent to a Mr. Karl von Ossietzky, or it was intended for Karl von Ossietzky. I saw this telegram in the display during our tour of the museum. And from where I was standing, I could clearly see the numbers 109. And I was bugging like, come on. Why are these numbers here again? I mean, I was grateful, of course, but I'm like, are you serious again? So I had to ask the tour guide. I said, maybe I was thinking to myself, maybe I'm bugging out. Maybe that's a 209. I'm not sure. So I asked her, could you please read those numbers? And she said, oh, you mean 1934 and 109? I'm like, thank you. Like, yeah, I'm not bugging. Those numbers are right there. Yeah, it's 109. So the story goes, those are just the numbers of the recipient, the Nobel Peace Prize recipient. It's just a number written on the telegram. But Karl von Ossietzky's story is so profound because it was his Nobel Peace Prize nomination was the most controversial of them all, because he was up against the Nazis, and anyone who supported his nomination was publicly going against Germany and the Nazi Party, and that wasn't the best look at the time. I mean, in hindsight, historically, yes, that's the right thing to do. Go against the tyrannical, oppressor of Adolf Hitler. But Germany was so significant at the time that, no matter what the outcome, no particular nation wanted to be seen as against them. And so Karl von Ossietzky's nomination put nations in that position to say, if you support this nomination, of Karl von Ossietzky, then you're going against against Germany, because Karl von Ossietzky was a journalist, and he was talking about the evils of the Nazi parties, and how they were aggregating, collecting their weapons in order to do harm to people. He was letting it be known, and that was, he was basically, and the Nazi parties were like, well, you're spreading state secrets, revealing state secrets, and we can't have that, so we've got to punish you. So that's it, y'all. Those are my stories. 10-9. Thanks for listening. We're ending this after 1 hour and 9 minutes.